Okay. All right, guys. So today we're going to do a little bit of practice. These first four questions, sorry, tongue tied. I would like you to match these on your own. So you can just draw lines connecting which ones match, okay? So you do these on your own. Let's go ahead and together jump to problem number 5. It says if y varies directly with x, and y is 15 over 2 when x is 3, which equation describes this relationship? So it tells me that it varies directly. All right, so remember when it varies directly, that tells me it's going to be a special linear function. Remember, these are the ones that go through the origin. So your b value, y equals mx plus b, the y-intercept will be 0 because it goes through the origin. So you don't have to worry about that. And m, instead of slope, remember on this one we give it the special letter of k because it has a special slope. And what makes it special is you only need 1 point to find your slope. So on this one, I know the equation will be y equals kx. And to find k, you take your y and you divide it by your x value. Okay, so all we need is 1 point. Well, it gives me a point right here. Because remember, a point is any time it gives us an x and a y value that go together. So boom, we have our point. So I need to take my y value and divide it by my x value. So on top is y. Well, I know y was 15 over 2. And on the bottom is x, and we know x was 3. So all I have to do is figure out what is 15 divided by 2, or 15 over 2, divided by 3. So notice this is a fraction within a fraction. This is pretty ugly. We hate having fractions within fractions. Our calculator can take care of this for us, but remember, we have to type it in very carefully so it does it correctly. All right, so a fraction within a fraction. If you go to your calculator page, because it's a fraction, we're going to start by pressing Control Divide. Okay, don't type anything yet. Control divide. Okay, then I have my numerator and I have my denominator. Well, I know I have another fraction in the numerator, so make sure you're on the top and press Control divide again. So it gives me spaces to make a fraction in the numerator. So now I can type my numbers in. So on the top, I have 15 over 2. On my denominator, I had a 3. So 15 over 2, all divided by 3 is 5 over 2. So what we did is we found k, we found our special slope. So I know to write my equation, all I have to do is plug in my slope here, and I have my equation. So I'm looking for the one that has a 5 over 2, and I do not see it. So I know the answer is not here. Okay, that's not the only way you could have done this problem. There's several ways. Notice this one has answer choices, so we could have tried them out. I have an x and a y value, so I could have plugged it in. When x is 3, I could have plugged it in right here, and in my calculator did 2/3 times 3. And whenever x is 3, I would click enter to see, does that give me y of 15 over 2? So it doesn't matter which way you choose to do it. If you forgot this way, I know I have an x and a y value. Go ahead and plug those in to see if it works. So I know if I plug in 3 for x, y has to be this. So I'll show you just on a few of them. So I know y is equal to 2/3 times x. So let's do 2/3 times, I know x has to be 3. 2/3, and I know x is 3. 2/3 times 3 is 2. So whenever x was 3, y is 2. Well, that's not what it told me. I know I want y to be 15 over 2 when x is 3. So let's try another one. Let's try C, okay? So 15 over 2 times my x. Well, we want x to be 3. So when x is 3, when I type this in, I should get 15 over 2. So 15 over 2 times our x, which is 3. So Control divide 15 over 2 times our x, which is 3. gives me 45 over 2. So when x is 3, this is telling me y is 45 over 2. That's not what I wanted. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. Either way of those will work. You have to do it this way when you don't have answer choices. But if you have answer choices, plug in. If it gives you an x and a y, plug it in and check it out. Okay, on number 6, it says, what is the slope of a line that passes through these 2 points? Okay. I've taught you how to find slope by putting it into a table and doing the change in y's divided by the change in x's. And I've taught you how to do it by rise over run when looking at a graph. I do not like either one of those ways, first of all, because I don't have a graph to do rise over run. Second of all, I don't like doing the change in y over the change in x from a table because we have weird fractions. So there's also another way that you will find on your star chart, which is this problem is also going to help you, match on the top. So another way to find slope, and I'm sure this formula looks familiar to you, is m is equal to, your slope is equal to y2 minus y1 all divided by x2 minus x1. And this is the same thing as the change in your y's divided by the change in your x's. To find the change in something, you subtract them. So that's all that's happening here. I know the y2, y1 thing confuses people, which is why I like to teach finding slope this way, like this. So remember I told you y's rise, okay? So what I like to do is I start with the big fraction bar, and I'm going to put a minus sign on top and a minus sign on bottom. This is how I always start. Before I write a single number down, if I'm trying to find slope, between 2 points like this, I'm going to put a big fraction bar with the minus sign on top and bottom. Okay, and remember, y's rise. A lot of people think it matters what point you start with because of all of the y2, y1 thing. It does not, but what does matter is that you're consistent. So if I start with this point, I need to make sure I write these numbers down first on top and bottom. Okay, so the y's rise. So in my first point, I have to indicate which one is x and which one is y. I know it's x, y. Well, y rises, so I'm going to take my y value, put it on top. The x has to go below it. So the y rises, so this one I'm going to put on top first. Your x goes right below it. So my y is a -2. My x is a -4/3. Okay, so like I said, it doesn't matter what point you do first. I could have used this point first, but I just go in order. All right, so now I'm going to move on to this one. Identify your x and y. We know y's rise. So I take my y value, that's going to go on top. And my x value, which is -3, is going to go on the bottom. Okay, this is big, ugly. Notice we have fractions within fractions, so it's super ugly, guys. So we're going to have to be careful in the way that we type it in. All right, so we're going to go type this exactly as I see it on my paper and my calculator. Okay, because it's one big fraction, I'm going to press by pressing Control Divide. Okay, my numerator first. I know on the top it said -2. Then there was a minus sign. And then we had the fraction 5 over 2. So I'm going to press Control Divide again to make my fraction for me. On my top, on the numerator, I have -2 minus 5 over 2. Okay, now let's do the denominator, the bottom part. Well, on the bottom part, I have a negative fraction, so I'm going to put negative, Control Divide. Always press Control Divide before you start typing in your numbers. Okay, so that's -4 over 3. So I have -4/3. Then we had a minus sign, and then we had a -3. Okay, so I had -4/3 minus a -3. Okay, now this should look exactly the same as what we wrote down. I know it was big and ugly. Click Enter. It takes care of it for us. We get -27 over 10. Or if you want to change that to a decimal, you can. Okay, let me talk about how we can change these into a decimal. This is the way I would like you to do it. I want to change negative 27 over 10. So negative, control divide, 27 on top, a 10 on bottom. And then what I want you to do, if you want to change it to a decimal, is just after you type one of your numbers, you click the decimal. It says 10 point. Okay. If you click enter now, it changes it to a decimal for you. So you can leave it as your slope is negative 27 over 10, or if you would rather, you can write it as m, your slope is negative 2.7. I know, guys, that most of you probably like decimals better, but the further that you go along in math, I'm going to let you know that fractions really are easier. So I am going to choose, and y'all are too, because we're working together, we're going to leave our slope as a fraction. Okay? All right. So we answered 6. We answered, what is the slope that goes between these 2 points? Boom. I found the slope between these 2 points. All right, on number 7, completely different question. It says, what is the equation in point slope form of a line that goes through this point and has a slope of 1/3? Well, guys, the name tells me what we need. We need a point, which that was given, and we need slope, which that was given. Uh-oh. Guys, give me just a second. I need to run get my charger. All right, and I am back. Okay, so point slope form, you need a point, you need the slope, and then you can write the equation. Well, both of those things were given to me. I have my point here, I have my slope here. So remember, point slope form looks like this. And my point will be plugged in for x1, y1, and then your slope will be plugged in here. Okay, so slope of our point. Okay, remember a point is an x comma a y. Now I'm going to plug into these. Okay, so y, my equation says y minus, and then I'm going to put my y1 value. So I'm going to put my y value of my point. So I put y minus, my y value of my point is a -2. Equals, okay, next is m, which is slope. It told me the slope is 1/3. Parentheses x minus, and now I need to put my x value from my point, which is a 5. Okay, I don't want to leave it like this because we have a double sign right here, which is not proper. We know minus a negative, okay, a double negative is going to be a positive. So really that's y plus 2 equals 1/3 x minus 5. Okay, and guys, whenever I do point slope form, I like to think of these minuses as the opposite. So this is how I read it. Y, and then the way I think about this is put the opposite of your y value. Okay, so I think of this as the opposite. So I write y, and then I put the opposite of my y value. I put an equal sign. I put my slope. I write a parentheses x, and then I think of this part right here as opposite of my x value. So I'm going to write it again out to the side. So I know it's y, and then I'm put the opposite of my y value. So y, the opposite of my y of this -2 is a +2. Then I put equals my slope, so I'm going to put equals 1/3. Next, I'm going to put parentheses, and I'm going to put x and the opposite of my x value. X and the opposite of my x value is, my x was a +5, so I need to put a -5. So that's the way I like to think about it. So instead of actually writing it out like this, minus a negative and then changing it to a positive, I just think about it as the opposite of my y value, the opposite of my x value. So whatever these signs are, when you write the equation, they're going to be opposites. Also, I have a lot of students that might mix up where these go. An easy way to remember that is your y value is going to be beside your y. Your x value is going to be beside your x. And just remember, your signs will be opposite. So I know this number has to go beside my y, and it will be opposite of a -2. It's a +2. I know this number has to go by my x, and it's going to be opposite. It's a +5, so I know it has to be a -5. Okay, it's just how I do it in my head. Okay, new problem. We have 2 new points, and it's given these points, do each of the following. Okay, so we're going to use these 2 points to answer the next question, next few questions. First, it says find the slope. All right, so if you wanted to make a table from this one, since these numbers are not as ugly, that's fine, but I'm going to practice doing the formula again. Oops. So I know it's y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Remember, you're just finding the change in your y's divided by the change in my x's. So before I write any numbers, remember, I put my minus sign, I put my division bar, and I'm going to put a minus on top and a minus on bottom. Okay, remember, it does not matter what point you do first, okay? Just remember the y rises, its x has to go below it. I go in order, so I'm using my first point. Identify the x and the y. So y rises, so my -3 y value goes on top. The -1 x value has to go below it. All right, let's move on to my second point. Identify your x and your y. The y value rises, so that -9 goes on top. The x value of that 1 goes on the bottom. All right, so now that I have it written out, I'm going to go type this into my calculator exactly as I see it. So it's one big fraction, so I press Control Divide. Okay, on the numerator, the top was -3, then there was a minus sign, then it was a -9. Okay, I'm typing it exactly as we had it written. On the bottom, I had a -1, then a minus sign, 1. So -3 minus -9 on top, -1 minus 1 on the bottom. All right, now I'm going to click Enter, and that gives me a slope of -3. So slope is m. Well, I didn't leave much room, but we can fit it on here. It says write an equation in point slope form. It's telling me to use the bolded point above. All right, so I know the name tells me what I need. I need a point and I need the slope. Well, the point it's telling me to use is the bolded one, this one right here. And the slope we just found was this guy right here. So I'm going to write my equation. And remember, point slope form is this guy. I'll write it out to the side real quick. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, remember your point is what you plug in here and here, and the slope is what you plug in here. Okay, so remember how I like to write it. I read it as I'm going to write y, and then I'm going to put the opposite of my y value. So write y, put the opposite of our y value. So y, the opposite of my y value. So my y value is a -9. So the opposite of that is a +9. Okay, so we did this part. We put y, and then we put the opposite of our y value. Now I'm going to put equals, and I'm going to plug in for slope. And we said our slope was -3. We just found that. Okay, so I did the equals, and I put my slope. So now I'm going to write parenthesis x, and I'm going to put the opposite of my x value. So I'm going to write parenthesis x, and I'm going to put the opposite of my x value. So I look at my x value, it's a +1. So I'm going to put a -1. And this is what the equation should look like in point slope form. Okay, we're in the same group of problems here. Okay, it wants me to write that equation, but this time I want it in slope-intercept form. So the same equation we just came up with, I'm going to rewrite this at the top. Y plus 9 equals negative 3x minus 1. Okay, so this is the equation of the line in point-slope form. Okay, now we're going to convert this equation into slope-intercept form. So we want it to look like y equals mx plus b. So our goal now is to isolate y. So we're going to solve for y. So y plus 9 equals negative 3 x minus 1. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so remember, if I want it in slope-intercept form, that's y equals mx plus b. My goal is to get y by itself. So I see parentheses, so the first thing I'm going to do is distribute. I'm going to take this negative 3 and multiply it by x. That's going to give me negative 3x. Next, I'm going to take this negative 3 and I'm going to multiply it by negative 1. A negative 3 times a negative 1 is a positive 3. On this left side, I still have y plus 9. Okay, so in that step, what we did is we did our distribution. We got rid of our parentheses. So now I can focus on isolating y. Well, y would be alone if this plus 9 wasn't over here beside it. So I'm going to get rid of plus 9. And to do that, I do the opposite. I'm going to take away 9. What I do on one side, I do on the other. Notice I keep my like terms lined up. My plus 9 and my minus 9 cancel, so y is now on that side by itself. On the right side, I did nothing to my x's, so those negative 3x's can drop. And now let's just do, I had a positive 3 and I subtracted 9. 3 subtract 9 is a negative 6, so I'm going to write that as a minus 6. Y is by itself, so now it is in the form of y equals mx plus b. So that tells me my slope, m, is negative 3. My b is negative 6. That's kind of ugly. Let me rewrite that. That doesn't really look like a 6. So it told me to find the y-intercept. Well, when it's in slope-intercept form, that's y equals mx plus b. Okay, the b is your y-intercept, this guy, the number that's by itself. Well, we just said the equation in slope-intercept form is y equals negative 3x minus 6. So my b value is the number that's by itself. So we know b is negative 6. That's our y-intercept. Slope was negative 3, which we knew that because we found that on problem, what was it? We figured that out on problem 8. Y equals m, our slope, we already knew was negative 3x. And then our b value, our y-intercept, is negative 6. Okay, now it tells me to find the 0. Okay, well, we got to remember that 0 is just another word for the x-intercept. All right, so to do that, we're going to graph our equation, our slope-intercept equation, and we're going to use trace. So we're going to graph y equals negative 3x minus 6. So I'm going to go graph this guy. So in my calculator, I'm going to go to a home page. I'm going to add a new document. We never save. And in my graph, I'm going to type in negative 3x subtract 6. Okay, so that's what it looks like. And I'm trying to find the 0, the x-intercept. Well, I can see that this line touches the x-axis right here. So there was a tool I taught you that we can move here, and it's called Trace. To get there, we press Menu 5, 1. All right, so I can move this using my left and right arrows only. So I want to move this guy to where it's on top. So I'm going to use my left arrow. And I'm going to move it until it hits the x-axis. Remember, the word 0 will pop up. Boom, so 0 popped up. That's telling me I'm on the x-axis. So I know my 0, my x-intercept, is at negative 2. Or you could have wrote it as the point also. But the x-intercept is negative 2. Or you could have said the x-intercept is at negative 2. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to write our equation in standard form. So we have our equation written in two different ways. Here we have it written in point slope. Here we have it written in slope-intercept form. Okay, so remember these are the exact same line, they're just written differently. So like for example, if I have 100 pennies or if I have 4 quarters, it's still $1, it just looks different. So this equation and this equation are the exact same line, they just look different because they're in different forms. Okay, so now we're going to write it the third way. We're going to write it in standard form. Well, the easiest one of these to work from if I'm trying to go into standard form is this guy right here. Okay. So remember, standard form is ax plus by equals c. So this is the goal. I want to transform my equation to look like this. So I said the easiest one to work from is y equals negative 3x minus 6. All right, so I'm going to transform this guy until it looks like here. Okay, so the first thing I want is I want my equation to start with my x's. So here's my x's. I want them to be on the other side out front. So I want these guys on the other side over here. Okay, but if I'm going to move what side it is, I have to do the opposite. So I no longer want my x's over here. So I'm going to do opposite. The opposite of minus 3x is to add 3x. What I do on one side, I do on the other. I can't put plus 3x under my y's because they're not alike. And I want my x's to lead, so perfect. Minus 3x and plus 3x cancel. That goes away. Okay, so on this side, remember I want my x's first, followed by my y's. So at first, I have positive 3x's. And we don't have to put the plus out front. It's understood that if there's no sign, it's positive. Okay, then I have to put my y values. Well, notice I have only a single positive y value, so I'm going to write that as plus y. On the other side, these guys cancel, so the only thing that's left is my negative 6. Okay, there are some rules in standard form, so let's make sure that this leading number, the number in front of your x, remember, it can't be a negative and it can't be a fraction. Well, lucky us. This is a positive 3, so it's not negative. And 3 is a whole number. It is not a fraction, so perfect. I don't have to take care of any of that. So this is what it looks like in standard form. So all three of these equations, boom, this one, and this one, all form the same line. They're just written in 3 different forms. This is point-slope form. You needed a point and slope to write the equation. This is slope-intercept form. You needed your slope and your y-intercept. And this is standard form. This is my least favorite. But, all right, guys, that's it. Let me stop presenting and hang up.